In today's video, I want to talk about after-school meltdowns because if your child comes home from school and melts down over something small, you are definitely not imagining things. And it's not because they were good all day and now they're choosing to be difficult. For many kids, especially kids with ADHD, this after-school period is actually one of the hardest parts of their day. As parents, we often feel like, okay, why are they fine at school all day? And then everything just seems to fall apart as soon as they get home. And it can feel confusing because naturally you're thinking, if you can behave at school, then you can definitely behave at home. And this can make it seem like the child is making a very deliberate choice to misbehave at home. That's frustrating, it's exhausting to manage every single day, and it can also lead to a lot of guilt from parents. It can also create a negative relationship between you and your child. But what's actually happening has a lot more to do with how much effort it took for the child to have to hold it together all day than a choice the child is making to have a meltdown when they get home. Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm a PhD behavior analyst. I've spent over a decade working with children and families, and I'm also a mom of 2 kids with ADHD. Throughout the school day, kids are managing their own behavior, making decisions, using a lot of their working memory, and navigating environments that don't necessarily reduce a lot of this behavioral friction. Even for kids who have additional school accommodations like extra time, fidgets, standing up to do their work, most accommodations target some areas of needs, but certainly not all. So when the child spends the entire day doing all of these things, they can eventually experience something called restraint collapse. And that just means that they've been holding it together all day, and when they get home, their system just says, okay, that's it, I am done for today. I like to think of self-control kind of like a battery. It's not unlimited, and these systems can also become fatigued. Think about trying to save money, but you keep getting emails or texts from your favorite stores. Eventually, your self-control starts to wear down, and you buy something that you didn't really intend to buy. You don't do this because you just don't care about your goals anymore, but because your system is taxed. And there's only so long that you can go without collapsing. Kids experience the same thing. And for kids with ADHD, this decreased inhibition gets added to a brain that's already more sensitive to impulsivity and emotional dysregulation. So when they blow up, it's not really surprising. It's actually a very predictable behavioral response to everything that came before it. In behavior analysis, we call these things setting events. These are things that happen earlier in the day, sometimes even hours before, that make certain behaviors more likely to happen later on. So things like hunger, fatigue, or medication wearing off can affect behavior. And if we don't consider these factors, behavior can be really easy to misinterpret, even for people like me. Like they're having a meltdown because I said no, but if the real issue is hunger, fatigue, or regulation, then strategies that are only targeting compliance or cooperation aren't going to work because you're missing the cast of characters that support cooperation as the main focus. So now that we know what this after-school restraint collapse is, how can we tell if our child may be experiencing it? Well, some signs can be increases in irritability, emotional outbursts, maybe just shutting down, tiredness, or even increased hyperactivity. Some helpful strategies are meeting their physical needs like food and water, giving extra transition time, maybe having more structured routines, or adjusting meds when needed. But today, I wanted to focus specifically on how to create a good landing when your child first arrives home from school. In behavior analysis, we call these neutralizing routines. These are pre-planned activities that help reduce or neutralize those earlier setting events that we talked about that are making your child more sensitive to what's happening in the moment and more likely to struggle. Something I hear often is parents will say, well, I do let my kid relax after school. I let them watch TV or maybe go play with a friend when they get home, but they still melt down after. And that's because not every activity is a neutralizing routine. A neutralizing routine has a very specific job. It's meant to reduce the impact of those earlier setting events so your child is less likely to struggle in that moment. So if your child is coming home hungry, then the neutralizing routine might involve food. If they're coming home overstimulated, then the neutralizing routine might involve quiet or low demand activities. So now that we know what neutralizing routines do, then how do we figure out what are neutralizing routines for our own children? Here, I always recommend that we start getting curious about our child. We can ask ourselves, what do they gravitate towards right after school? What do they do when they're most calm? What helps them regulate? What makes things worse? Are there any side effects from their meds that I need to know about? What is the cycle of the medication? And what is it that they're asking for as soon as they get home from school? And this next part is important. We want to write these things down rather than rely on our memory. We want to be able to identify and track patterns. You don't need a whole journal or document everything your child does in perpetuity, but just notice and write things down for a few days. You already know what neutralizing routines are and what they feel like because adults do this too. That can sometimes look like listening to very exciting music on the way to work before a tough meeting, or maybe listening to more calming or relaxing music on the way back home. That can also often look like us sitting in the car and waiting before coming in the house right after work, or maybe even just scrolling on our phones for a few minutes. As adults, we build these routines into our day already. Kids need the same thing, they just need help setting them up. In my house, this is what we've landed on. We start with an early dinner because both of my kids come home very hungry. Then they get about 30 minutes to choose what they want to do, and this looks different for each one of them. Sometimes it's TV, and if that's the case, we stick to longer shows or movies, not fast-paced, short content. We've noticed that short content actually makes things a lot worse for my kids. Other things that work for my son are building, coloring, or running outside. For my daughter, it looks completely different. For her, it looks like making clay sculptures, reading, or just a little bit of time to be on her own. And these routines have actually changed as they've gotten older, so we've had to go through the whole process of identifying new ones for them, which has helped us also practice flexibility as parents. These routines work because they let the child pause, regulate, reset, and recharge before we ask them to do more. Now, I do want to say that neutralizing routines are just one part of supporting a smoother after-school transition. They won't completely eliminate meltdowns because behavior is influenced by multiple factors. You may still need to use things like transition warnings, breaking tasks down into smaller steps, or just adjusting expectations. But this is an effective place to start because it addresses the conditions that make behavior more likely to happen in the first place. We are never looking for, nor are you ever really likely to find, one perfect strategy. We're building systems that help support our kids. After-school meltdowns are not random, they're predictable. They're the result of a long day of effort. If this is something you're seeing at home, I'd love to know. What does after school look like for your child? Have you tried any of these neutralizing routines before? And if you want more strategies like this based on behavior science, but actually practical for everyday life, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.